On a stormy Tuesday night, Barack Obama made a phone call he never wanted to make. What he said in those 3 minutes changed the fate of an entire continent. It was just past midnight in Ouagadougou. The presidential compound, usually calm at this hour, buzzed with quiet tension. Outside, lightning cracked through the West African sky. But inside the presidential office, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood still, eyes fixed on a secure phone, its red light blinking. He hadn't asked for this call, he hadn't expected it, but it came, with a name no one would believe. "Sir, the line is secure," whispered his communications officer. It's President Barack Obama. Traoré blinked once. No expression. Then, finally, he picked up. But what could Obama, thousands of miles away, no longer in power, possibly want from a young African soldier who'd just overthrown a government? "Captain Traoré." Obama's voice came through calm and slow, like a man choosing each word with surgical precision. "I know you didn't expect to hear from me, but I need to tell you something before it's too late." There was a moment of silence, not fear but calculation. Traoré's jaw clenched. He'd grown up watching this man on TV, the first black U.S. president, a man many Africans had once called our global uncle. But that was then. And now he was calling him? Why? Obama's voice returned. This time, lower, almost emotional. "There's something about Thomas Sankara I never told the world. And now it's time." Across the hallway, all surveillance was shut off. No recordings, no documentation. It was standard for high-level foreign calls, but what wasn't standard was the president pacing. Traoré didn't pace, he marched, but now he was standing in silence, listening. Obama spoke for 12 minutes, and what he said in that time left even Traoré, usually unshaken, visibly stunned. "You've been chosen," Obama whispered. "But they won't let you rise unless you understand the game you're in." Traoré leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Obama took a breath. "I mean, you don't yet know how deep this goes." The call was just the beginning. What followed would pull in France, the CIA, and a secret alliance buried since 1987. It was 1987. Thomas Sankara, revolutionary president of Burkina Faso, was giving a speech, one that would unknowingly seal his fate. He warned Africa about Western puppetry, economic slavery, and the invisible hand manipulating African leaders. But in a dusty room in Paris, his words were being live translated. One man leaned forward. A smile crept onto his face. "It's time," he said in French. "He's gone too far." 1 week later, Sankara was dead, shot 12 times, buried in a shallow grave. After the call ended, Traoré didn't speak. He walked to his old leather-bound journal, pulled out a folded page written in fading ink. It was a letter, signed by Sankara, a letter that had never been made public. But somehow, Obama knew what it said. "How did you know?" Traoré whispered into the quiet room. There was no answer, just the faint thunder in the distance. Why would a former U.S. president reference a secret African letter buried for 36 years? Unless someone else had read it too. 3 hours later, a U.S. drone circled low over the presidential palace. Officially, it was a weather observer. Unofficially, it was an eye in the sky, watching the man Obama had just spoken to. Inside a conference room, Traoré met with his inner circle. He didn't speak of the call, not yet. Instead, he played an old VHS tape, black and white footage. It was from Sankara's final interview, and one sentence stood out. "They may kill me, but they will never kill my ideas. And one day, someone will answer the call I never got to make." Traoré looked around. No more silence. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., Barack Obama sat alone in a darkened study. He wasn't crying, but he looked broken. "Did I do the right thing?" he murmured to himself. Michelle entered the room. She didn't speak. She simply put a hand on his shoulder. "You told him what he needed to know," she said. Obama nodded slowly. "Now we just have to pray. They don't stop him." But it was already too late. The CIA had been listening, and so had someone in France. In a private cafe in Paris, a man in a gray suit sipped his espresso. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply pulled out a phone. One button. One call. "It's time," he said. "We cannot let this child play king." Back in Burkina Faso, a low-ranking intelligence officer stormed into Traoré's quarters. "Sir, yet we've intercepted a message. They're planning something, possibly in 48 hours. Traoré didn't flinch. He turned to his aide. "Activate Project Echo." Project Echo wasn't just a protocol. It was a name. A code for something buried, dangerous, and older than Traoré himself. And as the doors to the underground archive opened, something inside was ticking. Dust filled the air as the thick steel doors slowly slid open. Hidden beneath layers of concrete and reinforced stone, the archive had not been touched in nearly 4 decades. Traoré stepped forward without hesitation, though the air smelled like time itself had decayed in that room. He was met by the faint hum of an old generator system still running. Just barely. Inside the archive, beneath the red lights and trembling pipes, sat a black leather case with gold rivets. No labels, no symbols, just weight. He placed his palm on it. Warm, as if someone had touched it not long ago. Behind him, his aide whispered, "Sir, no one's been down here since Sankara died." He didn't reply, not with words. He unlatched the case and opened it. Inside, papers, not many. Just a few pages, but each one was heavy with names, signatures, ink faded and blurred by time. A map, not of roads or mountains, but of secret agreements, fund transfers, and coded operations. One word was stamped on the top sheet in French. Liberation temporaire. Temporary liberation. And beneath it, a list. Every name on it had either been assassinated or was in hiding, until now. He stared at the last line of the page. A blank space with the label, "Successor confirmed 2022. The ink was fresher. His name was written there. Ibrahim Traoré. Back above ground, the sun had begun to rise over Ouagadougou. But no one on the streets had any idea what had just been uncovered. Not the ministers. Not the journalists. Not even the foreign intelligence agents tracking his every move. He locked the archive behind him. Traoré returned to the war room, placed the pages on the table, and looked each of his generals in the eye. "Gentlemen," he said, voice calm, "there's something you all need to know. We were never free." Silence, then confusion, then fear. He passed around copies of the final page. One of the generals, eyes wide, asked, "Is this real?" Traoré didn't flinch. "They called it independence, but these documents show we've been managed, controlled, funded, betrayed." He tapped a finger on a line that read, "Operation Eclipse, 1961 to present, classified under Franco-Afrique doctrine." "The French didn't leave," Traoré continued. "They just changed uniforms." The room fell silent again, this time longer. Then one voice broke the stillness. "If this goes public," his intelligence chief muttered, "they'll come for you." All of them, not just the West, everyone. Traoré stared out the window. "They already are." 12 hours later, a private jet landed in Bamako, Mali. On board was a man who hadn't been seen in public in over 10 years. His passport identified him as a Belgian aid worker, but his real name was Lazare Fortier, a former intelligence operative with ties to French military elites and corporate oil boards. He met with 3 men in a secure compound near the runway. "He's moving too fast," one said. "We thought this boy would be easier to mold." "He's not a boy," Fortier replied. "He's a symbol. And symbols are dangerous. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré prepared for a national address. But this wouldn't be broadcast on state TV alone. He'd arranged for direct relay via private encrypted satellites, reaching out to youth in Congo, Nigeria, South Africa, even the Caribbean. He knew the truth was a fire. Once lit, it would spread. His speech was not rehearsed. No teleprompters, no advisors. He stood alone in front of the camera and spoke. Africa has bled for too long, he began, and too many of us have called it peace. He paused. They assassinated Sankara and told us to forget. They looted our gold and left us with debt. They put uniforms on our traders and called it democracy. The world watched as he lifted a faded photo, Thomas Sankara as a young captain. But we remember, and we will not kneel anymore. In Washington, a red alert triggered in the Africa Bureau of the CIA. In Paris, the Élysée Palace issued a formal statement calling the speech unproductive and inflammatory. In Accra, thousands of students gathered in a square and chanted his name. But inside the Pentagon, a different kind of meeting was taking place. A general pointed to a screen displaying Traoré's face. This man is becoming a problem. What's the recommendation? A civilian official asked him. Discredit, disrupt, or remove. The room was silent. Then came the response. No assassinations. Not yet. We'll try optics first. That night, Western media exploded with headlines. Burkina Faso's young leader rants against allies. Unstable military captain accuses France of conspiracy. A rising star or dangerous radical? But Traoré wasn't watching the news. He was deep inside a bunker, on another call. Not Obama this time. This voice was older, rougher, filled with fatigue. And something else. Regret. I tried once too, the voice said. I believed they'd let us lead ourselves. It was an old revolutionary from East Africa, one whose name had been erased from textbooks. They don't fight with guns now. They use debt. Media. Division Traoré nodded. I'm not trying to win their war, he said. I'm starting a new one. At a private media company in Paris, an emergency strategy meeting was being held. 5 executives, all connected to major outlets, reviewed a single brief. Neutralize Traoré via narrative shifts. One executive asked, Do we have any scandals on him? Another laughed. He doesn't even own a house. They sighed. Then the youngest among them raised a finger. What about religion? Can we stir something? The others leaned in. Back in Burkina Faso, strange social media accounts began popping up. Anonymous posts claiming Traoré was secretly allied with extremist groups. False stories tied him to fictional atrocities. Every hour, a new wave of disinformation hit the platforms. But something strange happened. The people didn't buy it. Instead, young Africans started sharing his speech on Bluetooth drives, Telegram groups, even graffiti. And across cities, 2 words began appearing everywhere. Finish Sankara. By morning, they were painted on walls in Ghana, Congo, Senegal, Rwanda. In Paris, Fortier picked up the phone again. He's more dangerous than Sankara, he told the voice on the other end. How so? The voice asked. Because he has something Sankara never did. What? A generation with nothing left to lose. In the corridors of the African Union, quiet arguments erupted. Some presidents feared Traoré was pushing the continent toward war. Others whispered that he was saying what they all believed, but were too afraid to voice. A secret vote was cast. Should the AU condemn or support him? It came back deadlocked, exactly even. In that silence, 2 presidents made private calls, one to China, one to Russia. Would you protect him? They asked. Both replies were similar. What's he offering in return? Traoré had just finished a military briefing when his aide rushed in. Sir, it's Denzel Washington. He turned. The actor? The aide nodded, eyes wide. He just posted a video. He's crying. He says, "You've awakened something in him." Traore smiled for the first time in days. It's starting. And across the Atlantic, Denzel's words echoed, "I've played heroes. But this man, Traore, is real. He reminded me why we fight." The video went viral in hours, even more than Obama's leaked call, because it wasn't about politics. It was about something deeper. Legacy. By the next morning, children in Harlem wore shirts with Traore's silhouette. A mural appeared in Lagos. A rap song dropped in Nairobi with the hook. They shot Sankara but forgot the seed. Now Traore rises. Africa, believe. In Paris, Fortier's hand trembled as he poured his morning coffee. He turned to his associate. If we don't stop him now, he'll be in every textbook in 10 years. Or every battlefield in 2. He nodded. Then we moved to phase 3. The associate raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Fortier's eyes narrowed. Leak the footage. It began with a grainy clip. Night vision, a shaky camera, a group of men dragging bodies in the desert. The narrator's voice was distorted. This is how Ibrahim Traoré handles dissent. The footage was posted to 5 anonymous accounts simultaneously on TikTok, X, Instagram, and 2 encrypted websites linked to foreign intelligence leaks. Within minutes, Western media picked it up. No confirmation, no verification. But the headline screamed the same lie. Mass grave found linked to Traoré's regime. Across CNN, BBC, and France 24, analysts with grave faces began dissecting the video. They spoke of war crimes, sanctions, military interventions. And yet, in Burkina Faso, something didn't add up. Locals recognized the landscape in the footage. Not Burkina, but northern Libya. A site already documented during the NATO-backed war in 2011. Even the clothing of the soldiers didn't match. Arabic patches, foreign boots, imported weapons. Traoré called an emergency press briefing. He stood at the podium, holding the still frame of the video. This is not Burkina Faso, he said calmly. He held up another image. This footage is from a NATO operation. You all know which one, but they thought you would forget. The room fell into a stunned silence. I will not defend myself with lies, he continued. I will defend this truth with blood if I must. Across Africa, the tide began to turn further. Journalists, once afraid to challenge Western narratives, began digging. An investigative reporter from Nigeria traced the video's metadata. It had been edited in a high-end studio in Brussels just 48 hours before the release. A South African filmmaker did a frame-by-frame analysis, proving the men in the video were actors hired by a private military contractor, one tied to an infamous oil company operating in Mali. And then came the whistleblower. A young technician from France's DGSE intelligence agency defected. He posted a 6-minute video. My name is Mathieu, he said. I was part of the media operations team assigned to discredit Ibrahim Traoré. That video is fake. I helped edit it. The world shook. The UN attempted to calm the uproar. Spokespeople asked for patience and thorough investigations. But it was too late. Traoré had not only survived the storm, he'd weaponized it. His message now carried more weight than ever. They will lie. They will frame. But they cannot erase what we remember. In Harlem, activists projected that quote onto the side of the United Nations building. In Dakar, students held silent marches holding photos of both Sankara and Traoré. In Brazil, a senator requested a diplomatic meeting with Traoré's team. In Moscow and Beijing, silent phone calls were made. And in Paris? Fortier smashed a glass against the wall. They turned the trap into fuel, he whispered. His associate handed him another file. We have something else, she said. Fortier opened it. Inside were transcripts from a private call, one that had been intercepted weeks ago. It wasn't just Traore this time. It was a secure three-way conference between Ibrahim Traoré, Captain Ibrahim of Mali, and General Tiani of Niger. The three had been discussing a secret proposal, one that would end the CFA franc currency once and for all. Worse, they weren't just talking. They had already signed a new economic pact, backed by gold. The file also included something more terrifying: a draft agreement with a South American coalition to bypass SWIFT, the Western banking system. They were building an alternative, a financial rebellion. Fortier stood, paced, and looked out over the Paris skyline. "This isn't just Africa rising," he muttered. "This is the end of control." His associate nodded. "So what now?" Fortier's voice was cold. "Kill the dollar, kill the man." Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré met with his inner circle. There were no suits, no ties, just soldiers, technologists, economists who had returned from exile, revolutionaries with nothing to lose. He placed the intercepted intelligence file on the table. "They know our plan," he said. "We move faster now." He turned to a woman in military fatigues. "Colonel Sore, activate Operation Komboa." She nodded once and walked out. 1 hour later, a broadcast was sent from Burkina Faso's newly constructed satellite tower. No encryption, no filters. Just clarity. A message to every African nation. We will no longer use foreign currencies to buy African goods. Our gold, our cocoa, our cobalt, our diamonds will be traded with value we define. The world gasped. Markets shook. In Wall Street, alarms rang. The African stock index tumbled, artificially. France threatened diplomatic action. The European Central Bank froze assets. But people on the streets of Kinshasa, Banjul, Accra, and Lusaka danced. It wasn't about the currency, it was about sovereignty. For the first time, a generation born into debt felt something new. Control. In a basement studio in London, a young African-British DJ sampled Traoré's speech and mixed it into a viral track. Within 48 hours, it was the most streamed protest anthem in the UK. In New York, college students organized a virtual seminar. Neo-colonialism and the Traoré Doctrine. In Johannesburg, murals appeared overnight, painted in red, gold, and black, with bold words, "Africa Guardian." But shadows still loomed. A convoy moved in the dead of night across the northern border. No flags, no insignia, just military-grade vehicles and foreign-trained operatives. Their target, a compound outside of Koudougou, where Traoré was rumored to be holding secret strategy sessions with Pan-African leaders. The convoy never made it. At 3:17 a.m., a drone feed captured an explosion. Burkina Faso's defense system, quietly upgraded through non-Western technology, had activated a new era of warfare. They had intercepted the attackers before they got close. The wreckage was examined. Among the remains, dog tags. Not African, not local, European, and worse, American. Back in Washington, a memo was passed through secure hands. "They've made us visible," it read, "and now the world is watching." Traoré didn't respond publicly. Instead, he attended a village funeral for a soldier who died defending the capital last year. No cameras, no speeches, just silence and prayer. Later that night, his advisor asked, "Why not strike back?" Traoré looked up at the stars. "Because if we become them, we've already lost." But across the continent, others were not so patient. In Lagos, protests became riots. In Kinshasa, the local police resigned en masse and joined the people. In Dakar, an entire government office burned to the ground after files were leaked showing decades of foreign kickbacks. Traoré's voice had lit the match. The people carried the flame. And in Los Angeles, Denzel Washington released another video. His voice was calm, heavy. I said this man was real. Now I say this. He may not survive this, but what he started already has. In a private security room in Brussels, Fortier stared at a red dot on a screen blinking over Burkina Faso. He clicked a button. The screen shifted. Now it showed red dots across 27 countries. From the Sahel to the Caribbean, from Harlem to Haiti. Traore was no longer just a leader. He was a signal, a siren, a spark. Back in the war room, Traore's aide handed him a letter. No stamp, no seal. Just a name written in elegant ink. Lumumba's last witness. Traore opened it. Inside, a single sentence. You've done what we only dreamed of. He folded the letter, placed it in his coat, and stood. We go to Addis Ababa, he said. It's time. Time for what, sir? His general asked. Time to tell the African Union we're no longer asking for unity. We're building it, with or without them. The camera feed in the presidential palace shut down for a moment. The signal was scrambled. And the story you've just heard was never meant to be told. But now, it cannot be stopped. The African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa hadn't seen this kind of tension in decades. Guards lined every corridor. Foreign delegates whispered behind glass doors. Cameras clicked from every corner, but Traore didn't flinch. He walked in wearing a plain, dark tunic. No medals, no parade uniform, no entourage of bodyguards. Only two people followed. Captain Ibrahim from Mali and General Tiani of Niger. 3 leaders, 3 nations. One message. The room of dignitaries, many with ties to France, the EU, the IMF, shifted uneasily as he approached the stage. Some expected a request, others expected a threat. What they received was a challenge. Traore stepped up to the podium. He placed a folder on the stand and looked each delegate in the eye. I'm not here to negotiate, he said. I'm here to invite you, not to follow, but to stand beside us. A murmur passed through the room. You've all seen the currency shift. You've seen the pipelines being reclaimed. You've seen the truth leak faster than your lies can patch. He paused. Today, I bring a treaty, not one imposed by a foreign hand, not one scribbled in a foreign language. The Pan-African Security and Economic Pact, written in Bambara, Mure, Swahili, and Amharic. He opened the folder and placed it in front of the chairperson. If this pact is not signed today, we will move forward without the African Union. You may remain a symbol, but we will become the body. Gasps filled the chamber. One delegate stood and shouted, "This is coercion!" Traore looked at him. Number coercion is what they did to your fathers. This is liberation with a deadline. The room fell silent. Outside, protesters cheered as news of the speech leaked. Hashtags exploded. Unasi African Guardians, Tiasi New Union, Ahasianas from chains to choices. In Nairobi, a popular radio host screamed into her mic, Traore just put the entire AU on notice. Meanwhile, in Washington, a new kind of war room was activated. Not military, not financial, but cultural. The plan, smear him from within. Old classmates, ex-girlfriends, fabricated scandals. Anonymous bloggers claimed Traore had stolen speeches from Sankara's archives. An exiled politician from Burkina suddenly remembered that Traore had once accepted a gift from a Chinese investor. But the people weren't buying it, because for the first time in modern African politics, they saw someone not pretending to be perfect, just someone refusing to be bought. Inside the African Union, the vote began. 38 members. Only 17 signed the pact. But that was enough. That night, Traore walked out of the AU building with a new mandate, a living one, carried not by politicians, but by nations. But as his plane took off, something strange happened. Air traffic control in Ethiopian airspace received an emergency transmission. Unidentified aircraft descending fast, no response to calls. 10 seconds later, static, then silence. Traore's jet vanished from radar. Panic erupted. In Burkina Faso, people rushed to mosques and churches. In Niger, students screamed in disbelief. France denied any involvement. So did the US. But the sky doesn't lie. 3 hours later, a video appeared on a private Telegram channel with 300,000 members. It showed Traore alive, standing in a forest somewhere near the Sudanese border. His voice calm, face dirty, shirt ripped. They tried to silence the message by targeting the messenger, but Africa does not kneel anymore. Cheers erupted across the continent. Hashtags surged again, this time with one word. # phantom flight people began calling him the ghost of Ouagadougou. Western media tried to shift the narrative. Is Traoré staging his own disappearance? But locals near the crash site had seen the explosion, had helped recover what remained of the plane, minus its passengers. Their testimony was clear. The crew ejected before impact. Someone knew. Someone inside the intelligence network had warned them. A double agent? A loyalist? No one could confirm. No. But one thing was now undeniable. Traoré had survived an international assassination attempt, and the world knew it. Back in Brussels, Fortier's team was unraveling. "You told me he'd be gone," Fortier growled at his analyst. The woman stammered, "We use the best tech available. Israeli jamming, Russian radar blinding, American route spoofing. It should have worked." Fortier didn't respond. He simply looked at a map. Africa was glowing, not with fire, but with unity. All across the Sahel, something ancient had reawakened. Griots sang songs of Traoré like they once did of Shaka Zulu and Sundiata Keita. Even in countries not aligned with the pact, local leaders began to echo his tone. And then came the biggest blow. At the World Economic Summit, the president of a major South American nation walked off stage mid-speech and announced a new gold for oil exchange with Mali and Niger. No dollars, no euros, just value for value. And in a twist no one expected, a Caribbean bloc of 3 nations joined the African Economic Pact, citing centuries of shared resistance. The system cracked. Traoré, now operating from a hidden mobile command, addressed the world through a pre-recorded message broadcast via open satellite. "If I fall, let it be known. I did not run. I rose. And if I rise again, know that I do so with 1.4 billion hearts behind me." It aired in over 50 countries, translated into 19 languages, projected on the walls of Berlin, murmured in the markets of Johannesburg, chanted in the favelas of Rio, and in Los Angeles, Denzel Washington did something no one expected. He showed up on CNN, live, and wept. "This is what Thomas Sankara died for," he said. "And if they silence this man, it will be on all of us, every artist, every voice, every soul who claims to stand for justice." The anchor didn't know how to respond, but she didn't need to. Because by the next morning, millions of Americans were asking, "Who is Ibrahim Traoré?" And the answer wasn't coming from politicians. It was coming from TikTokers, from teachers, from students who'd never heard of Burkina Faso but now wore his image on their backpacks. Back in Africa, a new convoy moved quietly. Not one of soldiers, but of software engineers. Traoré had summoned them. From Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda. They met in a decommissioned uranium mine, now converted into a subterranean tech lab. Their mission? To build Africa's own encrypted messaging platform, immune to Western surveillance, to create a digital nation where ideas, strategies, and stories could flow freely. And they succeeded. Within 3 weeks, the beta app, Saudi meaning voice, launched. Within 2 months, it had 100 million users. Governments in the West tried to block it. But by then, African telecom providers had rerouted infrastructure through a decentralized mesh built on open-source blockchain satellites. The genie was out. The continent wasn't just waking up, it was coding its own destiny, but Fortier wasn't finished. He had one last plan. Not an attack, Not an assassination, but an invitation. A secret summit was arranged. Location, Geneva. Attendees, select African presidents, European billionaires, and one surprise guest, Traore himself. Against the advice of his generals, Traore accepted. When he entered the room, every camera was off, every microphone muted. Fortier stood and offered his hand. Traore didn't take it. "You've changed the world," Fortier said. Traore nodded. "Not alone." "But change breeds chaos," Fortier replied. "Markets are crashing. Alliances crumbling. This isn't sustainable." "Freedom rarely is at first," Traore answered. "Then let's stabilize it together," Fortier offered. "We'll support your economic pact. Quietly. We'll allow your currencies to grow. You'll keep your sovereignty. But in return, we ask for just one thing." Traore waited. "A seat at your table." The silence was long. Traore leaned in. "You never gave us a seat. You gave us a leash, and now you want a place in the house we built after you burned ours?" He stood. "This isn't your table, and we're not asking anymore." Then he walked out. The summit collapsed, and the war Fortier tried to stop turned into something far greater than war. It became culture. It became currency. It became memory. And somewhere deep in Burkina Faso, in a small village untouched by time, an elder lit a candle before a wooden carving of a lion. She whispered a prayer, not for Traore, but for every African child born that day. Because now, they would grow up hearing the story not of conquest, but of reclaiming, of rising, of roaring, of guarding what was once stolen and making it sacred again. Traore's plane touched down under heavy rain. No red carpet, no press. Just a convoy of dusty pickups waiting quietly along the tarmac. He was back in Burkina Faso, but it wasn't the same country he had left behind weeks earlier. Billboards no longer showed foreign banks. They showed fields of millet, solar panels, mothers holding babies, not as symbols of suffering, but of strength. As his boots stepped onto the wet runway, a soldier saluted, but Traore stopped him mid-gesture. "No more salutes. We're brothers in this now." The man dropped his hand. His eyes welled. Not out of fear, but reverence. In the capital, tens of thousands had gathered, not because they were ordered, but because they heard whispers he had returned. And they didn't want to miss the moment history walked past them again. Traore didn't give a speech. He didn't stand on a podium. He walked into the crowd. People reached out to touch his shoulders. Mothers pressed babies against his arms. Young boys chanted, "Traore is us," as if they were remembering something they never learned in school. In Washington, Fortier's office was quiet. He sat alone. The screens around him showed no battlefields, only graphs, rising African currencies, plunging influence indexes, a map with digital pulses glowing across the Sahel, East Africa, even the southern belt. One of his aides entered. "Sir, should we initiate Phase 5? Fortier shook his head. "It's too late. We tried sanctions. We tried lies. We even tried bullets." He turned his chair slowly toward the window. "But we never tried listening, and now they don't need us." In a remote town near the Guyana border, a small school opened its doors. No Western funding. No NGO. Built from local clay, solar-powered and named Maison du Futur, the House of the Future. On its wall, a mural, a lion guarding children as they studied under the tree of knowledge. Beside it, words in 5 languages. "We do not inherit freedom, we build it." Back in Ouagadougou, Traore convened what many believed would be a press conference. It wasn't. It was a funeral. The coffin bore no body. Only symbols, chains, an old French textbook, a bottle of IMF-labeled pills. And then he said, "Today we bury dependency." Not with hatred, but with understanding that it served a purpose. And that purpose has ended. He turned, opened the coffin, and lit a single match. The flames spread fast, and as smoke rose into the orange evening sky, the crowd went silent. Not mourning, but releasing. In Mali, Captain Ibrahim launched the region's first sovereign crypto banking system, with no tie to the World Bank. In Niger, General Tiani completed a vast food corridor that linked farmers directly to markets using solar trains, cutting out corrupt intermediaries. In Senegal, a group of teenage coders, mostly girls, unveiled Saudi AI, a voice assistant that answered history questions in Mandinka, Yoruba, and Wolof. But it wasn't just about tech. It was about remembering, about choosing, about being loud, bold, and unafraid of the mirror. Even the diaspora felt it. In London, black youth centers painted murals of Zulu warriors beside images of Traore. In Brooklyn, children wore shirts reading, "I know where home is." Even in Paris, a wave of young African-French activists marched, not for citizenship, but for acknowledgement. That evening, an American news anchor asked a historian, "Is Traore the new Mandela?" The expert smiled. Number Mandela made peace with the past. Traore is demanding the future. And then, on the eve of a new African year, marked not by colonial calendars but by the moon and harvest, Traore made his last public appearance. He stood atop a hill outside Bobo Dioulasso. Around him, only candles. No microphones, no drones. Just elders, farmers, teachers. Women who ran entire villages while men had fled wars. Traore sat on a woven mat, and he said, "We have told our children that heroes wear medals, that power is in uniforms, that wealth is in gold and influence. But tonight, I ask you to teach them something else." He pointed to the stars. That power is the seed. That wealth is what we don't have to beg for. And that heroes are those who remember who we were before the world told us who to be. There were no cheers, only stillness, as if the continent itself had taken a deep breath, and then let it go. That night, for the first time in 50 years, no Western military plane flew over the Sahel. No foreign aid caravan interrupted local economies. No think tank in Europe could predict what would happen next. Because finally, Africa was off the grid of control and plugged into something far older and far deeper. A rhythm that drums could not teach. A truth that schools did not tell. A voice rising from soil, sweat, tears, and blood. The voice of guardians, not just of land, but of legacy. And so Traore disappeared again. No palace, no motorcade, only rumors of his travels through villages by night, of helping a boy with a broken bicycle, of planting a tree where a colonial statue once stood. He became myth, then memory, then movement. And one day, far from the cameras, a young girl sat under a tree in South Sudan, reading a story aloud to other children.
She paused, closed the book, and asked, "Do you think he was real?" Another child smiled. "Does it matter? He made us real." And with that, they ran into the wind. No borders, no fear, just stories in their lungs and fire in their feet. Because now they knew Africa was not waiting to be saved. Africa was remembering how to guard itself, and the world would never again forget its roar.